Hey, Veena, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Hi,
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Um, and how are things at your end?
Yeah, it's going good. Yeah, we are working on our product, doing demo, selling. Yeah, it's going fine. Just working from home.
How about your business itself within the context of COVID situations?
Right. Yeah. So we had a little bit of a hit in, I guess, April, but then things are starting to look really good. We've had a lot of demos. We're working with right now. We're just doing everything remotely, and it's been working really well. So we have about three today, and we're just showing them the product remotely, and then if they like it, they're buying it.
If you think about the time when you were able to sort of meet your client physically and then maybe
Hmm.
demonstrate that right in front of them, how different is that situation compared to now?
It's definitely better in person because when we do demos in person, uh, we don't we let them try it out, and when they try it out is when there's the this works, this is amazing, and like you're totally immersed in the VR world. That's something that we cannot do now, but at least the people that we're demoing already know about VR. They've come to us and they want to understand more. And just knowing what applications we have and what the benefits are is seems to be what people are able to actually decide to purchase. But it's definitely better in person, and I do miss doing that. It's amazing to see people's reactions when they wear it and try it out, and it kind of just clicks. And especially for physical therapists, once they tried one of our apps, they start to think about which patients they can use it with, how they can use it. So that was amazing too. See, and we do miss that part.
Hmm. Hmm. And I'm kind of thinking about all the therapists who are sort of helping their patient to rehab and without the use of tools as such, and then when they get these tools, is that complementary to what they are already doing?
We always think about VR as complementary and as an enhanced tool that they can use in VR for a physical therapist, because they do other use other equipment like Bosu balls or foam, or sometimes the body weight support systems. And with VR, they're just having this really amazing tool that they can use with a whole of their patient population, and also do specific tasks and customize it for each of their patients too. And then you
Right.
have all the data analytics part, which is amazing, so that they can also get data, uh, quantitative data from the therapy that they just did versus very subjective data from they would get from other non-tech equipment.
And what does the data tell you? Like, I'm sure you would have had many different cases, and perhaps over the years you would have gathered different data sets, and perhaps you would have made the adjustment along your application. What I mean, in short, like, what does the data tell you?
Use it and watching our therapists use the applications. It's our applications that it looks totally different from what it used to be a couple of years ago. And from the data itself, the therapist and the patients can see the progress that they're making. It could be depending on what their goals are. They could be trying to increase their flexion or extension, like range of motion, or work on their core or movement from side to side. So with this data, they're able to see how much they're able to actually move and what they need to work on. Uh, Quantitatively. For sometimes there are patients who make very incremental uh, progress. It's very hard to figure that out when you're looking at a person versus when you have quantitative data to look at. So that changes, and that also gives feedback for our patients and therapists. There's that intrinsic feedback when you're able to complete a task, and there's external feedback when you're able to see the data reflect that too. And now you can know if you're progressing or not, and also figure out what part of the body or which function that you need to work on more. And the therapist can make that decision.
And what the reason why I wanted to sort of dive in a little bit into data side is is because when you did the first iterations, perhaps you would have seen a problem that you want to sort of, solve. What was that problem? And then, once you solve that problem, perhaps, you've gotten better and smarter over the years. And I want to sort of, take you into that moment when you saw, okay, this is something that I can solve with something like VR.
Mm-hmm. So I can say the problem that we first faced when we first started to create our applications was our probably the first game only worked for one of our patients and didn't really translate to a different patients with different functional abilities. So we have patients who had a stroke, brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, a patient with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and everybody's functional levels is this whole spectrum. And some are very low level, the others have better function. So we had to at first customize it for each patient, and that is not a scalable model. And that's one of the first problems that we ran into. So we started to create our application such that anybody with a very low function to a high function can also use it. That was the biggest things that we had to solve and make sure, because each therapy clinic has varied, not just each clinic won't just see stroke patients, then they'll always have stroke, brain injury, spinal cord. Some of them are specialized, but we wanted a system that is a turnkey solution that the whole clinic can use and with all of their patients. So that's what we were able to solve by getting feedback constantly from patients and therapists.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the evolution of patients, so when they actually used it for the first time versus when they're using it, I don't know, X number of times.
Right.
How do you get that that feeling that, okay, this person is actually improving? Of course, your data is one of the aspects. Perhaps there are other attributes that you want to look at. What are those attributes that you kind of want to focus on?
Here the things that we do is, in your while you're gamifying your VR environments, you'll have to have these constant values in there. Is that something that we use, that one of them stays constant and the others might change, like maybe the number of items in each level, or the score that you have to hit in each level keeps increasing, but there is something else that is constant. Because of that, we're able to quantitatively show this patient is getting better. And then we have our patients who come back and sometimes they're not able to finish a level because they get tired or they don't have that functional reach, but now they're motivated, they come back and they finish the next level. And now the patient knows they've gotten better and the therapist knows they've gotten better. It's very clear, even without looking at the data. And that gamification piece has been crucial for us.
What happens normally is when you ask a patient to wear the VR gadgets, and then perhaps the patient is able to really do the things that otherwise they think are not possible. When they take that gadget out, what happens to their mindset at that point in time? Do they still feel like they can do it?
I think so. There's definitely a revelation there that especially when you're able to like take a video of them in the VR environment and show that video after when they're outside, this is what you're actually capable of. And you had a mental barrier that, you knew what your diagnosis was, you knew what your abilities were, and you're kind of like sticking to that. So it is very hard to transition directly, but now at least they know that it was a mental barrier more than a physical barrier, and they will start working on it. So we've seen that happen. We've seen the caretakers and the family members of a patient say, I've never seen them increase the range of motion so much or move from their midline and actually bend forward or bend backwards. And just them, even the caretakers knowing that the other patients can do more is also very valuable.
Right, but because I can imagine, like, within the let's say the space of using the VR gadgets, perhaps we are tricking the person's mind by and then making them believe that they are able to do it. But as soon as you take it out, perhaps they may not be able to do it. And it comes down to mindset that what they are capable of versus what they can't, right? So
Exactly. And that's why you need repetition, you need training, you need to keep a pace when you're doing physical therapy and not have a lot of gap in between. So that kind of puts patient back to square one. But if they've been working on their therapy constantly and getting in their workouts, uh, it they always make progress.
I wanted to sort of, not just understand what your company is doing overall, but also wanted to understand, like, what led you into this. If you are to just give me a little bit of insight on how it all started for you.
Right. Yeah. So my background is in, computer science, game design, and development. I've always been into gaming, and I knew that I wanted to do something in the gaming space, but also in the medical space. So I was working on my PhD, doing simulation training for in VR for the medical space. And my co-founder kind of found me online actually, and we just met. And I thought it was, and he owns a clinic, and that's the clinic we kind of started in. And I thought it would be a really good collaboration because I love the part where whatever I create will be used by by the patients to make their lives better. So that's how it started.
Hmm. And when you actually got started, you're trying to solve a particular problem at that point in time, perhaps. And when you saw that problem being resolved,
Mm-hmm.
what did you learn at that point in time?
Oh, I think it was like it was not just one event. It's always series of events that kind of leads you. Yes, we can actually solve this.
Mhm.
So in our clinics, and for physical therapy, patient engagement is a big problem. People being engaged in their therapy and also compliance when after they're done with their therapy, and the patient experience. So most of our patients sometimes come in not wanting to do therapy. They're already tired. They've had this incident happen in their life that kind of changed their whole way they had to live very quickly. So they're still dealing with all of those feelings, and then coming to physical therapy it's not the easiest thing to do. So being able to see those patients having fun while they're doing therapy is, I guess, was one of our biggest motivators. And being able to, they're like we discussed previously, doing things they've not done before, increase in their range of motion. They're able to stay in therapy for longer periods of time because that's increasing the cardiopulmonary efficiency, and also watching them performing more than they had previously when the therapist was trying to make them get to their goals. So those were all like little series of events that led to, yes, this works and we need to start building on this, and this bigger than all of us.
I'm sure there are a lot of cases that you've dealt with so far as let's say a good progress is concerned, and there must be cases you felt like hard, this is something that we could have solved doing it differently. Are there any cases that you want to sort of reveal, or and directly or indirectly, um, and that you wish you could have tried something different?
Yeah, mostly. So the thing is, we do not dispense the therapy. The therapists do. The
Hmm.
therapists usually work directly with the patients. But from watching them and how they're using it, we have had places where we have added features into the game when we saw that this is something that the patient is struggling with, and we add a feature to make it easier for them. But there are a few times that does happen, once in a while, where the VR may not work out for the patient, and maybe it's too much stimuli, or there's an environment that they might not be able to deal with. So that way, there are things that we can't solve right away, and which might take longer. So we've had instances like that, but very few. And most of the time, we try to solve it as quickly as possible when we see it, and when we see it.
So how do you ascertain, okay, these are some of the parameters that I would sort of, recommend VR versus a, complete physical therapy?
Mhm. So Again, it all depends on the physical therapist and what they would like to do, because we are not medical practitioners. We do not give advice on what the patients need to use. But from all the learnings we have had from the last few years, we can tell the therapist, this particular application, you can use it for, gait training, purposeful coordination, if you're working on core control with your patient, and this is what it's best used for, and we can recommend what they can do with it. And then it's all up to the patient, up to the therapist to figure out which patient that they will use it with, and what level that they would start on, and what difficulty that they would use that particular application with the patient.
Okay, and Veena, I had a chance to talk to another one of the other let's say co-founder in the similar space, and I was really fascinated by the things that that is possible within the VR space, and then I'm also talking to you, and then I'm learning a lot, by the way. And I asked her a similar questions. One of the similar question is I'm about to ask you now is, it's like, basically you're building an app, right? So I'm thinking, okay, people who are not able to afford it, they still have a mobile phone, right? So is it possible to create the same experience, within the mobile phone?
I would say no. The reason VR is working out really well for our patients is the fact that you can be immersed in this totally different world, and you're actually not looking at your real limbs and your body, and that kind of takes that part where the patient has that bias of their diagnosis, where this is what I can do or cannot do, and that mental barrier, we kind of take that away and put them in a different scenario where they don't have the reference points to what they cannot do, and that kind of opens up possibilities in the VR world. And also being able to track their movements and give you that data works really well on the virtual reality system. But there could be a way where when it comes to phones, you could do probably assessments, you could do more cognitive tasks, but not something that requires physical movement.
Right. Because this is coming from the curiosity standpoint. Because I'm thinking it must be quite expensive as far as owning the gadgets are concerned, or even renting the gadgets are concerned. And pretty much everybody has the mobile phone, and if it would be much simpler. This is the layman's perspective.
Right.
Yeah, and just I'm thinking, like, it would be great if something like that exists, and even, let's say, using virtual reality gadgets and so forth, has, I don't know, whatever percentage of chances the person is going to get. But then if using mobile phone, maybe they are going to get half of that, but that's where the question is coming from.
Right. I mean, I definitely agree with that. It's a much faster, efficient, and probably cost-effective way of just creating the software. But right now we're concentrating on giving the patients as much benefits as we can, and the VR system just makes sense. And they could definitely be maybe an ancillary product around. It's not something that we're working on, but I can see where there's a mobile app and they can continue their therapy, especially for cognitive. It would work better.
What sort of challenges that you have as a business at the moment, especially, if you think about the pre-COVID situations, and then compare that to the post-COVID now, what sort of challenge that you're still dealing with, before and after?
Right. Yeah, I think just being in the healthcare space, it's a space that there is like slower adoption. There's a lot of regulations around it, and also the payer provider dynamic, and who will pay for the product, if it's insurance reimbursed. So those are everything that we had been dealing with anyway pre-COVID too. But I feel like with COVID, even though it's a very terrible thing that's happening to us right now, CMS being, uh, opening up more reimbursement codes, and then people taking a look at telehealth and looking at digital therapeutics. I think there's a movement here in healthcare where we feel like we'll make a lot of progress in the next few years. Then this progress would have probably taken us 10 or 20. And it's that progress is being accelerated, which is good for all the healthcare companies out there.
Right. I can imagine, the regulation being the bottleneck for a lot of startup now. We're trying to implement something new, and especially with the healthcare side, people are quite sensitive about data and how the data are processed and so forth. So what have you sort of, done in terms of keeping the, let's say, data intact for people who are a little bit sensitive about their privacy?
Right. Yeah. So we're sure that we're HIPAA compliant with everything that we create and make sure it's de-identified data, because we will never be able to identify the patient from the information that we get from them. So those are the things that hospitals and healthcare providers are most concerned about. And the thing is, we don't really need much patient identifiable patient data at all, and we don't really track it either. So we have not had much pushback because we always show them what data we are collecting, and till now we have not had many pushback as long as we cannot identify the patient and we know who it was by looking at the data, and then making sure you have all the right agreements set up with your employees or everybody who has access to this data, and everybody is HIPAA compliant and certified.
Right, right. Because especially in this European region, we are quite sensitive about data, and we have this whole GDPR implementation, and we are
Right.
quite proud that we are able to do that. We want to be able to see that when we are offering data, then of course it's not misused. At the same time, people don't make money off of us,
Right.
before there's a consent, right? So I'm sure a lot of these things, directly or indirectly, would be translated into the US, I guess. How do you see the therapists? What do they say about this tool itself? How many of them are saying, "Oh yeah, this is great, I'm able to help my patients," but at the same time there are skeptics, right?
Right. Yeah, when you're trying to do something new and novel, there's always skeptics, and there's always people who are not like technology as much as you would think. But overall, we've had a really positive feedback. Everybody uses our technology. I've had good feedback for us, and obviously we ask them constantly to let us know if something that we can improve and add more features. So for the therapist, one, it's making their job more efficient. They're able to, work on a particular patient and work on their goals, and probably increase the intensity of what they're performing with the patient too, because sometimes patients can get stuck, or the therapist can get stuck at one point doing the same exercise, and people may be bored. And this is a good segue to bring in VR, and also the data analytics showing you that it's getting better. And physical therapists are very creative people. We have seen them use our apps and tools in ways that we as engineers would have never thought about. So even though we created and we think this is the use case, our therapists have found more use cases for it and the way they would use it. So very creative people, and and with the skeptics, I think the feedback maybe that we have learned is sometimes previously it was the hardware, but the hardware has gotten much cheaper and it's much easier now. We are all moving towards a wireless portable system. Our previous products were wired and needed a computer. So now that barrier is gone. Everybody is more open to having an equipment that it's very portable and light, and they can take it around in their clinic. And then when it comes to the applications itself, we know that we have built what we have built till now is on keeping our patients in mind, making sure we're getting all the feedback from physical therapists, but we know we can do better, and we're always striving to add more apps and add more features.
When you look at this whole evolutions of people being able to use this particular tool, I would say, as in helping them to improve their livelihood. how do you see this, evolution going forward? Let's say from now to beyond, let's say 1 year or 2 years time. Like, how do you see this evolution?
Right. You mean for the physical therapist livelihood
Yes.
or okay. Yeah. So, because of COVID and what's happening around, I know a lot of physical therapists might be getting laid off or furloughed. So there are a lot of people who want to become independent physical therapists. So I see an evolution where the therapist might use it and go to individual patients' home to dispense therapy. There has been a movement towards where uh, senior care in senior care living centers and skilled nursing homes, people don't want to be in those uh, certain situations right now, and there's been a decrease in the amount of people getting into senior care centers or SNFs. uh, and I see an evolution where it will start going towards home and where the patient is, and having these hardware getting better and better and lighter and faster would be really helpful. And that's where I see it, and that's where I see the whole of healthcare going to. uh, First go to where the patient is, that is the home, versus them coming to you.
Right, right. Because the way we are operating now, is totally different, and everything is changed so much that we are sort of, trying to find our feet together, and to adapt
Mm-hmm.
to the present situation the best we can.
It's also more, if think about, if you have a fever or a cough, you'd rather have a telemedicine call before you go into a clinic to see a doctor. You can just be probably diagnosed remotely, and it's more efficient, it's more cost effective, it's better for the doctors. And once people start seeing the benefits of it, I don't think we'll go back to pre-COVID era and how healthcare was dispensed previously.
As far as the intelligence that you have created so far, within the applications, what kind of technologies that you are using in order to make it smarter every single time?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really go deeper into that, but we definitely have algorithms that kind of look at how the patient is performing and then
Yeah.
change the VR scenario depending on how they're doing. So that's something that we do. And we also give manual controls to the therapist itself, because they are the best judge as to where the patient is and their abilities and how they might. It's all, therapists are part therapists and part trainers, like in a gym where they're pushing you to do better and actually reach to your limits. So we give them controls as to the increase in the intensity or complexity of the applications too. So and then we also have algorithms that kind of takes a look at the data and changes intensity levels for our patients.
Every time you create something like, in the first iteration, perhaps it's not that smart. With the data, you
Right.
make it smarter, and so forth, right? And perhaps you are using the predictive modeling now, as we go forward. So that's something that is more interesting in this particular space, because you are all playing with data, right? So
Right. Right.
right, and I'm sure you would have thought about using those tools that are available. Uh,
Definitely. Yeah, it's always thinking about how best the data can be leveraged and how it best can be used for making sure we are customizing the patient experience as much as possible we can, because every patient, and I think there is a saying that says if you've seen one brain injury, you've only seen one, because the diagnosis and the parts of the brain that are affected for each stroke is like, or brain injury is very different, and everybody's affected in a different way. So the customization is really important. Personalization of the apps is important.
being in this space for quite some time, as an entrepreneur, what sort of challenge that you're still facing, being in the tech world, especially, how do you see this challenge going forward?
I don't know where to start. There are so many challenges.
I have all the patience, I have all the patience. So,
I mean,
yeah,
I think what I can say, talk a little bit about the VR space, is I think it's still maturing.
yeah,
And so we have had to deal with changing from one headset to the other, and having to deal with stock not being around for the headset, and because we're so dependent on the hardware. And that's why when you talk about the mobile phone, that I would want it to reach the point of the mobile phone evolution, where when you build for Android, it's very easy to build for iOS, and then it can be hardware agnostic and you can have it anywhere. And that's where the VR space is going towards. It's not there yet, and that would be the point that I am waiting for. And but because of that, we had to deal with a lot of hardware changes and optimizing our games from like a wired system with a powerful laptop to a wireless system that does not have as much power and only has power as much as a phone does, which is at this point a lot of power. But it's still hard to optimize. So there's that piece, and then there's the piece about when it's a new space like this, it is harder to find talent because there's not many people who've had years of experience when it comes to Android or iOS in the mobile space. Talent is something that I'm always looking out for. I've done so many interviews, I don't even remember at this point, when I'm trying to add team members. And then in the technology, things do keep changing very quickly, and we have to adapt quickly, even though good thing is healthcare is a little slower. So we have time to make all of these changes in a way. So there's the, silver lining, if you can think about it that way. But those are challenges that a few of the challenges that we have to deal with.
To be in the tech space and to be a woman, it's very, very challenging, right? And
Right.
because it's very difficult to find people motivated towards the, let's say, technical space. Often it's very difficult, and and that too, you are bringing up new things, artificial intelligence and virtual reality and so forth. I'm sure it's more challenging, right? And yeah, and I sort of remember as we were talking, I sort of remember her, and I just wanted to throw that question to you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as a woman, it is definitely harder to be in the tech space where you have to constantly prove yourself and prove your technical abilities. It does get exhausting, and just go ahead. So I know what my abilities are. I know what my technical knowledge is. I just keep reading as much as I can, even though I don't code as much as I used to previously. But I definitely know enough about this space to be confident and what I can do or cannot do. So I try to go back to that. So there's always somebody who's does not believe that you're actually capable. So I think it happens to almost all entrepreneurs, but more towards women and people of color too.
Yeah, of course, of course. I mean, this is a very harsh space. This is a very harsh tech space itself is very harsh, and perhaps it's the very rapidly changing space, right? So the things that were interesting yesterday is not interesting anymore today, right?
Right.
So that's where to keep up with the energy and to keep up with all the things that's going around in your personal space as well. At the same time, you are an entrepreneur. So I'm already having a lot of respect for that already. Why did you decide, you were a coder, like you said before, why did you decide like you have to go be that entrepreneur?
I think I didn't call myself an entrepreneur for the longest time. People started to call me one. And that's when like, okay, I guess I'm an entrepreneur now, because for me, I like building products and building new things and using new technology and building novel things that's not been done before. So on the coding side of things, that's why I was really interested in virtual reality and motion tracking technology, and also the advancements in game engines has been incredible over the years. I was just building products and MVPs, and that's something that I always did. And when I started this company, that's what I did the first year. I was just creating these applications for our patients and seeing how it's going and what they're doing. And then we started to think about business models and how do we get it out there. And I guess that's the turning point to actually become an entrepreneur. So I didn't call myself an entrepreneur for I think 2 years that I was working on this company. And it was mostly the love of working with new technology and building products.
Yeah, of course. If you're not passionate about creation of the solution, then obviously you are not an entrepreneur there. So obviously you had that passion about creating solutions, and of course the business side will come side by side, and that is
Right.
also equally important. And to sell the message is also important. And
And those are
what's
things that I had to learn, like sell the message.
and how, like, I'm sure there have been some challenges as far as, getting it through the market is concerned, and also getting funding and all those accesses and so on. How have you built this support system for you to sort of keep on going? What is supporting you there?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think going to the market, what good thing we started was create a really MVP product and learn from it, and then get it out to other people. So we had a little bit of time to learn and iterate. So that helped. So when we went to the market, we were ready with a bunch of applications that has been tried out by a lot of patients and therapists. So that way it was easier, because when I'm also I guess a QA engineer on our products, that I just go through and fix and say these are everything that needs to be fixed before I would even put this out there. So there was that learning curve. And then when it comes to the support system, we are supported by our co-founder, who's owns the clinic. He has been funding the startup since the beginning. And then we also received federal grants from DNSF. So that has been our influx of cash, and then the revenue that we are making out of this has been helpful. We also have board members that have been amazing to help me think big, think about a strategy, think about different business models and revenue streams, and then just the ecosystem that we are in right now. We get a lot of people who come to our website and talk to us, and once they do, especially for physical therapists, have feedback. And I think just having that back and forth, we've kind of created this community around us.
And if you are to think big now, like from what you said, like your stakeholders, or let's say your board members, are supporting you to think big. So what are you thinking about, right? So what do you want to think big now going forward?
It's mostly confidential, but I can tell you.
Tell me broadly.
Okay, I will tell you. So I guess we are in the physical therapy space. We can definitely do a vertical expansion to other spaces that we're kind of looking at, with stress and anxiety, because there are other products that are out there we can partner with. And then senior care, geriatric, pediatric. So there's this part, the vertical expansion of our products, because we started with physical therapy and we were really concentrated in creating products for physical therapists. Then we realized this works for occupational therapy too, very easily, and we got that feedback from a couple of OTs that we demoed for, and it's like, oh, good, this is, we don't have to narrow our customers to this. So we started to also market there. So that way we're thinking of vertical expansion. I can't really talk more than that. And there are other things in the back of my head, but that I'm still working on.
Yeah, because I'm sure there are interesting things that you're already working on, and because it's such a let's say a very competitive space, and
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure. Yeah, go ahead.
The opportunity is huge. I feel like all the companies that we are at, we're all still in early stages, and even though I think we feel like we've had a good market fit, but there's so much more we can do.
Yeah, of course. I mean, America itself is quite big, and I'm sure there's a lot of patients needing this kind of support, where otherwise they're not able to get access to these tools, which would help them to really transform their lives, and I'm sure it's meaningful for them.
Mm-hmm.
And going forward, how have you thought of really adding more resources to your arsenal going forward?
Yeah, so what I like to do best is make sure that we've tried to spend as little as possible and try to get to that traction point where we know this works and we have a really good product market fit. And that's kind of, I think we have reached that point. So I'm adding more people to my team. We are expanding, and we may go about and raise sometime soon. We're thinking about all of those things so that we can scale up. And the reason, in the beginning, we didn't want to spend too much and raise previously is because we've had things that had happened in the VR industry where, people, it was hyped up and few companies got a lot of funding and then it didn't work out. So investors are also very cautious in the VR space, but it's changing rapidly now. And that's why, so we'll be in a better point when we have proved the product market fit and we're raising money to grow.
Mhm, mhm. Now, one of the sectors that you are targeting is on the rehab and so forth, but I'm sure there are other sectors that you think, we've solved the problem on this side, but there are also other challenges, that we could perhaps solve. Not the exact same challenge, but maybe similar kind of other challenges. Have you thought about other sectors so far?
Yeah, there is definitely there are a few companies already doing this. So there's a really big need for VR in the training sector and education. I think those are the other two bigger sectors that are huge for VR, other than therapy, and also pain, stress, and anxiety, and where it's been proved that VR actually really works well. And when it comes to education and training, especially for probably residents or doctors that have to look at anatomy, and it's always better to look at something that's in 3D versus on a piece of paper on your book. So there's very good translation, especially when you have to look at probably a surgeon who's doing surgery on a patient and they're trying to figure out what the depth of the tumor is and things like that. So that's where VR and AR would definitely be a game changer. And I know there are a few companies working on that too.
So have you thought about also trying to, explore that side as well?
Not at the moment, I guess. We definitely don't want to take up too many things and just see how the rest of the industry is doing and jump in when we think the time is right, or if we because whenever we need to jump into something else, I definitely want to look at the market size and if it's big enough and see what the traction is till now and how the adoption rate is, and then that's a good point for us to start thinking about expanding to those areas. We like the therapy space because now there are a lot of physical therapists who are interested in VR and they're always trying to figure out a better way to be more efficient and cost effective and increase the patient experience. And we kind of fit that niche really well. So definitely going to concentrate on this for a while.
Mm-hmm. And let's say there's a tremendous support from the therapist, and I'm sure there's a lot of feedback loop from the therapist. And what does the doctor say about using this particular solution that you have to offer?
Oh, we've actually not had too many interactions with doctors because we speak to a lot of physical therapists, but doctors what our physical therapists do is go back to the doctor that has referred the patients to a clinic and ask them if it's okay, especially if they have maybe a contraindication like motion sickness or being nauseous. Go back and ask, get permission from the doctor saying, would this be safe? Is this something that we can use with the patient, and get approvals? And we've had positive feedback till now from the doctors. We have not had anybody say, no, don't use it with patients. But we've not really spoken directly to a lot of physicians, I would say. But we speak to a lot of doctor physical therapists, and physical therapists are mostly that we're in contact with.
I'm sure this has been an interesting journey for you so far. What are the key takeaways as far as your journeys is concerned? Again, it's broad and long and open and
right. It's not an easy journey, and I've realized it's not for everyone. And I think I've been evolving to be able to deal with a lot of the stresses, the ups and downs, anything that needs to go in there. But what I love about it is the learning. Like, I think I've learned so much in so many different areas in the last few years than I think I would have in any other if I had like a normal job or was still in school. Been better at my technical knowledge, my product management, the FDA regulations. I just went and read through all of it to understand how it works and do that, and then understanding the healthcare models in the US and the payer and provider dynamics. All of this is something that I would never thought that I would be interested in. So that's been great. So I love the learning. And then just being resilient when you're trying to build a company. There's always this, when they say the roller coaster ride, exactly like that. I feel like the highs are like pretty quick, and then you're like working on your company and making sure everything's going fine. There are always fires to put out. So it makes you a generalist where you're like able to deal with a lot of things at once. And I like having that skill and getting better at it.
So you definitely have told a great story so far,
Thank you.
um, and it was a wonderful conversation with you, Veena, and I'm sure you would be doing well in the near future, and all the aspirations that you have for this company that you have, and in the next year or so, I would like to come back to you again and ask like how you are doing, and hopefully it would be a different story. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I really enjoyed speaking with you today.